Picture a coral reef in the Caribbean. It is 2005. A scuba diver descends along a wall of brain coral, elkhorn, staghorn, parrotfish darting through gaps of color. The reef is loud with life, and then she sees something that does not belong. Hovering motionless in the water column, maybe 2 feet off the reef, is a fish unlike anything that has ever existed in this ocean. It is about the length of a dinner plate, striped in deep burgundy and white, and it has spines fanning out around its body like a crown of needles. 18 of them, each one loaded with venom. It is not fleeing, it is not hiding, it is simply hanging there, completely still, watching her, the way you watch something you have already decided is not a threat. That diver had never seen a lionfish in the Atlantic before. Almost nobody had. But within 3 years of that sighting, lionfish would be found from Florida to Venezuela. Within a decade, they would be one of the most abundant reef fish in the entire Caribbean. A species that took millions of years to evolve in the Indo-Pacific had crossed the world's greatest oceanic barrier, and it was winning. Invasive species usually struggle. They arrive without a foothold in the food web, without protection from local predators. Most die out quietly. The ones that survive barely manage. Lionfish did not survive. They exploded, and the more scientists studied them, the stranger the picture became, because it turned out the lionfish did not get lucky. It is, in almost every measurable way, built for exactly this kind of takeover. Its venom, its hunting strategy, its physiology, its behavior, every part of this animal operates differently from what we would expect. Every part of it is, in some sense, wrong for the world it came from, and now it has been dropped into a world that has no idea what to do with it. To understand the lionfish, you have to start with the body. Those spines are not decorative. The lionfish carries 13 dorsal spines, 2 pelvic spines, and 3 anal spines, each hollow and connected to a venom gland at its base. The toxin is a protein-based neurotoxin, not the most lethal venom in the ocean, but enough to cause extreme pain, nausea, and in rare cases, cardiac complications in humans. For a fish, it is nearly always fatal, and yet the spines are not how the lionfish kills. They exist purely for defense. The lionfish hunts with its mouth, and what that mouth can do is something else entirely. Lionfish are ambush predators. They do not chase. They position themselves near a school of small fish or shrimp, often using those large, wing-like pectoral fins to herd prey gently into a corner or against a wall of coral. Then they wait. Their striped pattern, which looks conspicuous to us, functions as disruptive camouflage in the broken light of a reef environment. Prey fish do not recognize the pattern. They do not register the lionfish as a predator at all. They swim closer, and then the lionfish opens its mouth. In under 15 milliseconds, faster than the human eye can detect motion, it creates a powerful vacuum with its jaw structure, sucking the prey fish directly into its throat from a distance of nearly a full body length. It is one of the fastest strike velocities recorded among reef predators. By the time the prey detects any movement, it is already gone. Success rates in the lionfish's native Indo-Pacific range between 50 and 80%. In the Atlantic, where prey has never encountered this technique, success rates climb above 90. A 2010 study in the Bahamas tracked juvenile reef fish populations over 18 months on reefs where lionfish had established themselves. Juvenile fish biomass fell by 79%, not 10%, not 30%. Nearly 4 in 5 fish were gone. The researchers described it as the most rapid documented decline in reef fish abundance following any marine invasion on record. Here is where the story takes its first unexpected turn. You might expect that the venom is what is protecting lionfish in the Atlantic, that local predators are avoiding them because of the spines, but the evidence does not support that. In the Indo-Pacific, the lionfish does have natural predators. Large grouper, moray eels, and certain frogfish have learned over hundreds of thousands of years of coevolution to handle lionfish carefully, targeting the unspined body cavity and avoiding the dorsal array. It is a learned generational behavior, encoded through selection over deep time. In the Atlantic, no such coevolution has occurred. Caribbean grouper, which should function as the lionfish's primary natural check in these waters, simply do not know what to do with it. In controlled feeding experiments, Atlantic grouper offered live lionfish, repeatedly rejected them, or approached with what looked like confusion, the unfamiliar silhouette, the unusual stillness, the pattern. None of it matched any prey template the grouper had ever developed. The venom is not the barrier, predator naivety is. The fish could be entirely harmless, and the outcome would likely be identical. This has profound implications for management. One of the most commonly proposed solutions to the lionfish invasion is establishing predator control, encouraging or even engineering conditions where grouper and other large predators learn to hunt them. NOAA researchers conducted a program in which they hand-fed dead lionfish to Atlantic grouper over an extended period, essentially training individual fish to recognize and consume them. It worked, but only for those specific animals. The behavior did not transfer. The lesson did not spread through the population. Each grouper had to be trained from scratch, and trained individuals reverted when reinforcement stopped. If you wanted predator control to work at any meaningful ecological scale, you would need to wait for the behavior to emerge naturally, spread socially through grouper populations, and eventually become encoded through selection across generations. That process takes centuries. The lionfish has been in the Atlantic for roughly 40 years. The math is not encouraging. The deeper you look at the lionfish's biology, the more you realize that the invasion is not an accident of circumstance. It is the result of an animal whose physiology was shaped by a very specific set of ecological pressures, and those pressures happen to make it nearly unstoppable in a different environment. Lionfish have an unusually elastic metabolism. Studies have shown they can reduce their metabolic rate by up to 50% during periods of food scarcity, surviving extended near starvation without significant muscle loss. This is rare among bony fish. It is an adaptation to the boom and bust dynamics of Indo-Pacific reefs, where food availability can change dramatically with season and storm activity. In their home range, this flexibility is a survival tool. It keeps them alive through lean periods. But the same metabolic flexibility that allows starvation tolerance also enables extraordinary caloric assimilation when food is abundant. In the Caribbean, where naive prey is essentially unlimited, lionfish eat continuously. They do not stop when sated the way many predators do. Their stomach wall is elastic enough to expand to roughly 30 times its resting volume. Specimens caught in Caribbean waters have been found with stomach contents representing several times the typical meal size for a fish of equivalent weight in the Indo-Pacific. This fuels reproductive output that is, to put it plainly, alarming. A single mature female lionfish can release between 12,000 and 15,000 eggs every 3 to 4 days, not per season, every 3 to 4 days. In the warm, stable waters of the Caribbean, with no meaningful cold season to interrupt the cycle, she can do this year-round. One female, in a single year, can theoretically produce over 2 million eggs. Not all of those survive, but in an environment with no predation pressure and unlimited food, the survival fraction is high enough to produce exponential population growth. Population surveys across the U.S. East Coast and the Bahamas have recorded lionfish densities more than 5 times higher than peak densities documented anywhere in their native range. The Caribbean has become a supercharged environment for a species that evolved under resource constraint. It is the equivalent of taking an organism shaped by scarcity and placing it inside an all-you-can-eat ecosystem with no competing species and no natural enemies. The outcome is not mere survival, it is dominance. And now the question the whole story has been building toward: how did a fish from the Indo-Pacific end up in the Atlantic in the first place? It did not swim there. The answer is more mundane and more uncomfortable than the biology. The lionfish has been a prized aquarium fish since at least the 1980s. Striking, unusual, relatively hardy in captivity, it was being imported into the United States in significant numbers by 1985. That same year, the first confirmed sighting of a wild lionfish in Atlantic waters was recorded off the coast of Florida. Genetic analysis of Atlantic lionfish populations has since traced them back to a remarkably small founding group, possibly as few as 6 to 8 individual fish. The entire invasion, spanning thousands of miles of coastline and hundreds of reef systems, traces back to what was almost certainly a handful of accidental or deliberate releases. A cracked aquarium tank during a hurricane, a fish that grew too large, too aggressive, too expensive to feed, tipped into the water because it seemed like the easiest solution. What followed is not a freak outcome. It is precisely what conservation biologists predicted would happen. The warnings existed, the mechanisms were understood. By the early 2000s, the trajectory was clear enough that researchers were publishing urgent calls for action. The lionfish is still being sold in aquarium shops in many countries today. There are no regulations preventing it in much of the world. The fish that has emptied Caribbean reefs can be purchased, kept for a few years, and disposed of in whatever way proves convenient. This is not an ancient mistake that can be attributed to a less informed era. It is ongoing, and that is the part of the lionfish story that sits most uneasily. Not the biology, not the invasion itself, but the fact that we understood what was happening while it was happening, and the trade continued. So how did a slow, venomous fish with no natural predators in half the world's oceans become the most destructive marine invader in modern history? It did not do anything remarkable. It simply existed. It evolved over millions of years in a system that could contain it. A system with predators that recognized it, prey that feared it, food resources that kept its numbers in check. In its home range, it was ordinary. A medium-sized predator playing a defined role in a complex web. We are the ones who picked it up and moved it, and the somewhere else happened to be an environment with none of those constraints. Abundant food, no predators, prey that had never encountered anything like it. Warm, stable water year-round, and a metabolism built for scarcity, now operating inside abundance. The lionfish did not break any ecological rules. We removed the rules and watched what followed. What the lionfish forces us to reckon with is a deeper truth about how ecosystems actually function. We tend to think of nature as resilient, self-correcting, stable over time, and it is over geological time. But stability is not a property of environments. It is a property of relationships. Predator and prey shaped together over millennia, competitor and niche honed through selection. The reef does not function because the chemistry is right, or the temperature is ideal. It functions because every organism in it has been sculpted over deep time to interact with every other organism in constrained and specific ways. Move one piece, the right piece, in the wrong direction, and the stability does not just waver. It collapses faster than almost any model predicted, in ways that may not be reversible on any human timescale. There are now more lionfish in the Caribbean than in the entirety of their native Indo-Pacific range. The most successful population of this species on Earth exists entirely outside its evolutionary home, thriving in a world it was never built for, because that world had no memory of it. The reefs are changing, some are emptying, and somewhere off the coast of the Bahamas, a fish with 18 venomous spines is hanging perfectly still in the water column, waiting with complete patience for something that does not yet know to be afraid.